Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, there has been a lot of discussion here in the Senate, in the House, and in the media about what the Super Committee is doing and what they should be doing. And the American people understand that the responsibilities that they have in terms of trying to reduce our national debt and our deficit is difficult, and I wish them the best of luck in coming up with a solution. My hope, simply stated, is that the Super Committee will do what the American people want them to do. And the American people, through demonstrations all over this country and in poll after poll after poll, have made it pretty clear what they want to see happen. The American people are becoming more and more aware that there is something very wrong in this country when we have the most unequal distribution of income and wealth of any major country on earth, when the top 1% earns more income than the bottom 50%, when in a recent 25-year period, 80% of all new income went to the top 1%, and when the gap between the very rich and everybody else is wider today than it has ever been since 1928, the year before the Great Depression. And if you think distribution of income in this country is unfair, then you should take a look at distribution of wealth, which is much more unfair. Madam President, today the wealthiest 400 Americans own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. 400 people, 150 million Americans. And that unbelievable inequality in terms of wealth is, in my view, not only morally wrong, it is very bad economics, and it is not sustainable. So when the Super Committee deliberates as to where they should go, I think one direction is very clear, and the American people of all political spectrums have made their point of view very strongly on this issue. Whether you are a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican, what poll after poll after poll shows is that when the wealthiest people in this country are becoming wealthier, when, as Warren Buffett reminds us, their effective, i.e. real tax rate is the lowest that it has been in decades, yes, the wealthiest people in this country are going to have to pay more in taxes to enable us to go forward on deficit reduction. So any serious plan brought forth by the Super Committee must ask the wealthiest people in this country to pay more in taxes. Furthermore, as I think everybody knows, we have corporation after corporation that benefits from huge tax loopholes. Study just came out today. 1 out of 4 major corporations pay nothing in taxes. There are examples that recently major corporations make billions of dollars in profit and not only pay nothing in taxes, get rebates from the IRS. Many of these corporations stash their profits in tax havens in the Cayman Islands and elsewhere to avoid U.S. taxes. And I think the American people are very clear that if we are going to go forward with deficit reduction, that large corporations are also going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. And this is across the political spectrum. So I hope that the Super Committee is hearing and understands that any agreement must contain significant revenue from the wealthiest people in this country and from the largest corporations. Furthermore, at a time when military spending has tripled since 1997, I hope as part of their agreement that the Supercommittee takes a hard look at our defense budget and asks whether it is really necessary that the United States of America spend more on defense than the entire rest of the world combined. So those are some of the areas that I hope the Supercommittee will explore, asking the wealthy to start paying their fair share of taxes, ending tax loopholes for large corporations, and taking a hard look at military spending, which has tripled since 1997. But then, Madam President, there is another area that the Supercommittee must also look at, and that is to understand that in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression, a recession caused by the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street, that the Supercommittee must not cut Social Security, cut Medicare, or cut Medicaid. Social Security is the most successful federal program in the history of our country. It has a $2.5 trillion surplus, can pay out all benefits for the next 25 years, and because it's funded by the payroll tax, has not contributed one nickel to our deficit. The Supercommittee must not cut Social Security. Madam President, 50 million Americans today have no health insurance, and many others are underinsured. According to a study at Harvard University, 45,000 Americans die each year because they don't get to the doctor when they should. Under those conditions, it would be immoral, it would be wrong for the Supercommittee to cut Medicare and to cut Medicaid. So I hope, Madam President, that the Supercommittee does what the American people have said very loudly and clearly. They've said it in demonstrations and clearly. They've said it in demonstrations. They've said it in polls. They've said it in communications with their members in the House and the Senate. We have an opportunity to make significant progress in terms of deficit reduction, but that deficit reduction should not take place on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. Those populations, the most vulnerable people in this country, are hurting enough right now. So, Madam President, I hope that the Supercommittee has the courage to do what is right. I hope that it has the courage to do what the American people want them to do. And with that, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, may I request that the pending quorum call be lifted
Without objection.
and that I be allowed to speak for up to 15 minutes?
Without objection.
Mr. President, we are going through one of the most difficult and painful periods in American history, and millions of Americans are wondering what is happening to our country. Behind the curtain of spin and propaganda and political attacks, here's what I believe is happening. The rules of the economic game in this country are increasingly being rigged to provide unfair advantage to the wealthy and well-connected and to take unfair advantage of regular folks and families. America has always promised a straight deal, and that straight deal for many Americans is getting harder and harder to find. Let me say that I am relentlessly proud to be an American. I grew up in the foreign service of this country, surrounded by families who put public service and pride in this country ahead of their comfort, of their convenience, even of their safety and their family's safety. I am absolutely convinced of American exceptionalism. I have seen it, and I have lived it. And that is why I am so upset to see our country in the shape that it's in today. Our founding fathers changed the world when they set in place our finely balanced system of government, illuminated by the clear and guaranteed rights of the American people. But we are squandering that inheritance. Our government isn't working, our rights are being undermined, and it is the American people who are paying the price. They're paying the price because too often they're not getting a straight deal anymore. So let's look at some of the places where the deal is rigged, where special interests get special deals, and where the irregular American family doesn't get a straight deal. Big multi-state banks are allowed to charge middle-class families 30% credit card interest rates that are likely illegal under the state laws where that family lives. And senators in this chamber who are ardent states' rights federalists in every other circumstance have no complaint when their state law is overruled and overborne by the big banks. Students with college loans who now carry $1 trillion of debt, and families with home mortgages are denied the privileges every corporate borrower gets to seek bankruptcy protection against their debt when they are in over their head. Our individual tax system allows the wealthiest and highest income Americans to pay lower tax rates than middle-class wage earners pay, or even hide their income in offshore tax havens and pay no tax at all. And the corporate tax system allows international corporations to route their profits through foreign countries and through tax shelters to pay little or no tax in this country. When you drill down to cases, GE, General Electric, on billions of dollars in profits, paid little or no federal income tax. When you pull up to look system-wide, even though corporations are richer than ever, American people now contribute $5 for every $1 that corporations contribute to sustaining our country's revenues. It used to be 1-to-1. For every $1 that corporations contributed, American people contributed $1. There was an even sharing of our nation's revenue needs. But for 75 years now, it has been steadily sliding, and now it is 5-to-1 against ordinary Americans and in favor of corporations. The wealthy elite who make their fortunes in the marketplace don't protect and honor the marketplace. They try to rig the game, even when it puts the marketplace itself at risk. And when that requires everybody else to come to their rescue, they show no shame and little gratitude and go right back to work gaming the system. Those who become CEOs extract from their companies ridiculous amounts of compensation. CEO pay is up in my lifetime from 40 times the average wage of the employee to 400 times the average wage. These CEOs even extract princely compensation when they fail. The big polluters have got one party denying science entirely, denying the plain evidence of carbon pollution all around us, and spinning the phony theory that the costs of controlling pollution are a burden on the economy, when they're actually a huge net gain for our country. A party that used to proudly carry the banner of conservation and environmental protection is now reduced to serving corporate spin masters with phony fabrications, and it's the middle-class families that pay the price. The appointees of one party on the Supreme Court by a bare 5-4 majority are willing to overturn precedent and flout the rules of judicial decision-making to decree something really novel and remarkable, that corporations are people, and that money is speech, and that therefore our precious constitutional rights to free speech as American people give corporations a right to spend as much money as they please, even anonymously, in American elections. International corporations with no loyalty to any flag or nation, but with virtually unlimited money, may now drown out the voices of regular people, regular families in our American democracy. CEOs get to use the corporate megaphone, amplified by the corporate treasury, to drown out their employees' voices. Just one big corporation with just 5% of one quarter's profits could match the entire political spending of both presidential campaigns in the last election. Our Constitution and Bill of Rights established the jury, not once, but 3 separate times, as an important institution of freedom in our system of democracy. De Tocqueville, one of the great historians and commentators on the American system of government, called the American jury one of the forms of the sovereignty of the people. And big corporations go to court all the time and fight it out before a jury when they want to. But over and over, if you're a middle-class family, in contracts that you can't negotiate or control, in fine print you probably never even read, your credit card company, your cell phone company, the companies you do business with, quietly take away your right to go against them before an American jury. And over again, those same Supreme Court judges who decided a corporation was a person have let them. You have to go instead to something called arbitration instead of a constitutional American jury. And to give you an idea of how arbitration works, for a long time, the biggest arbitration company in the country was a racket rigged to rule against the consumer, and it had to be shut down by legal actions by our state attorneys general. Add it all up, all those different areas that I mentioned, and it's a lot of changes since my childhood. And it's a lot of changes in how our country runs. And it's all in the same direction. Special deals and special tax rates and special rules that help big corporations and people who are as wealthy as big corporations, and that leave out regular people who don't have masses of money, money, money. Rules that allow corporations to intrude into our public discourse in this democracy and drown out people's voices through mighty corporate megaphones amplified by money, 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 and lies and nonsense cooked up in corporate spin factories being treated as fact, obtaining acceptability by how often the lies are repeated, thanks to money, money, money. Under all that money, what is drowning is the sense that we are all in this together as Americans. That one of the things that America actually stands for in this world is that we are fair with each other, that we get a straight deal, and that we give each other a straight deal. That's one of the ways that we as America set an example in this world, an example of being fair. There are plenty of countries in the world whose internal political and economic systems amount to a racket rigged for the benefit of their rich and powerful, where farmers and workers and ordinary families get screwed and the wealthy skim all the cream. Some of these countries are so bad we call them kleptocracies. The world is full of that. It has been the pride and joy of America that we are not like that. It has been our message to the world that it doesn't have to be like that. But now it is looking more and more that we actually are becoming just like that. So what can we do about it? What can we do to make sure Americans are getting a straight deal in all of this? I propose these things. 1, big banks should have to follow the state laws just like local banks do, and just like you and I do. No more going to South Dakota and marketing from there credit cards with 30% interest rates that violate the laws of your home state. 2, if big corporations can restructure all their debts in bankruptcy court, so should students and families be able to. No second-class citizenship for those who borrowed college loans and home mortgages. 3, amend the Constitution to make it clear that corporations aren't people. Never were, never could be. The good Lord just did not make it that way. And make it crystal clear that corporations can't spend money in American elections anonymously or through phony shell organizations. If big oil wants to influence American elections, Americans should know it's big oil. 4, straighten out our tax systems. And until we do, put in a minimum tax for ultra-high income earners that is at least at the rate that ordinary American tax-paying families pay. And while we're at it, put in a minimum corporate tax rate that's at least half of what average corporations pay. No corporation that is making millions or billions of dollars should get away with paying nothing in income tax. 5, shut down the offshore tax havens and charge companies a CEO pay surtax on CEO compensation that is more than 100 times their average worker's compensation. 6, make polluters pay the actual costs of their pollution. Why should a polluting company be able to push onto all of the rest of us the costs of their pollution? Why should American families bear that polluting corporation's cost? Economics tells us that should be part of the company's cost of doing business. 7, no more corporate tax deductions for offshoring American jobs, and no more favoring of offshore corporate income derived from what used to be American jobs. And 8, take out of those take it or leave it consumer contracts the provisions that take away in the fine print your right as an American to go before an American jury as the Constitution and Bill of Rights promises whenever you have a grievance or have been harmed. None of these things, none of those 8 things that I've just mentioned, ask anything of anyone that isn't fair. And most of them simply ask that ordinary Americans get the same deal, or at least no worse of a deal than special Americans get and big corporations get. This all does no more than put people on the same level, or at least under the same rules, as the rich and powerful. When someone is getting a better deal than you just because of who they are, you are not getting a straight deal. When someone is taking advantage of you because you are small and easy to take advantage of, you are not getting a straight deal. And when the rules of the game are rigged to help the winners win and to make you a loser, you are not getting a straight deal. And Mr. President, it is time we started giving the people of America a straight deal around here. I thank the President. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
A quick update on what's happened in the Senate so far today. Senators blocked a $60 billion transportation and infrastructure bill proposed by President Obama. The vote on that was 51 to 49, with 60 votes needed to proceed with the legislation. That bill, the president's bill, would have provided $50 billion for spending on roads, bridges, airports, railroads, and mass transit, and another $10 billion to create a national infrastructure bank. The Senate also blocked the Republicans' alternative transportation package. It would have delayed environmental regulations and canceled bike path upgrades and roadside beautification projects. The vote was 47 to 53. As we wait for a senator to speak, the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee met earlier this week, hearing from past debt commission chairmen about what their commissions have recommended to reduce the debt. The Congressional Quarterly writing that House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi today called on the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee to approve jobs initiatives that promote, quote, America's entrepreneurial spirit as the centerpiece of its work. In a letter to the 12 members, the California Democrat cited pieces of President Obama's jobs proposal that she said are essential to sustaining our recovery. In particular, she stressed the need for small business owners to have access to credit. Her letter did not include the steps to pay for the measures. Congressional Quarterly also reporting that House Speaker John Boehner said today that, quote, there is room for revenues as part of any agreement to the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee, but he says there's a limit to the revenues that may be available. The comment came as the committee was deadlocked over the size of revenues and the depth of cuts to entitlement programs. And the National Journal writing that according to a new Quinnipiac University poll released this morning, less than a quarter of voters think that President Obama and the committee will agree on debt reduction. In addition to blocking two transportation bills today, one proposed by President Obama, another Republican alternative, the Senate confirmed two nominees to be U.S. district judges, one in Wyoming and the other in Delaware. Some of our live Road to the White House coverage this weekend. 5 Republican presidential candidates will be in Des Moines, Iowa tomorrow night for the Ronald Reagan dinner. Speakers include Governor Rick Perry, former Speaker Newt Gingrich, Representatives Michelle Bachmann and Ron Paul, as well as former Senator Rick Santorum. That's live starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN 2. On Saturday, Republican presidential candidates Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich will face each other in a Lincoln-Douglas-style debate on economic and social issues. That'll be live Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN.